So we're coming to the last session. It's going to be a little bit different. We thought to just mix it up, and I've got with me a panel of speakers who I'm going to introduce you to now, and they're going to just share perspectives on a few things. So what I've done before this conference is, to a few of you ladies, I've put out a few questions, just saying, what are some of your struggles? Some of the older singles, some of the younger singles, what would you like to hear about at a conference like this? And the response was incredible, but there was certainly some threads that were coming through. And so it's some of those questions that I'm going to be putting to these speakers today, and they're just going to share some of their experience and some of their perspectives with us. But let's jump in. I'm going to introduce them. Well, closest to me, the beautiful Zandi Hulley. Zandi is an eldest wife, and together with her husband, Luke, they currently lead the City Bowl congregation. Zandi, I remember when things started happening between you and Looky Luke. And Zandi was still in my community, and I'm like, hey, if this guy wants to have Zandi, he needs to come past me. And there they are. So that's wonderful. Zandi, as I said, together with Luke, they're leading the City Bowl congregation. But before that, she was actually the committee. She worked at Parliament, and Zandi was the committee secretary for the Appropriations Committee at Parliament. I said to her, that sounds very important. But now she's doing equally an important job. She's also raising her, is a 3-year-old daughter, Namile. That's wonderful. Now, Mike, you may also be familiar with, the thorn amongst the roses today, Mike. Thank you for gracing us with your presence. Mike is a directing elder in Joshine. He's husband to Chantal and the father to 2 girls. Mike oversees our training and equipping across the congregations, and he is our go-to guy on the heavy theological topics that we'll be tackling in this session. And then Delia too. Delia is a speech therapist working at a school for children with special needs. She's also deaconess in the Sunningdale AM congregation, a single lady, single and available for the single guys who will be watching later on, and a dear friend and a co-worker in the church, in the Lord, who's faithfully discipled and walked with so many girls over the years and still continues to do that. And then finally, there on the far side, we have Lorna Baker. Lorna is also an eldest wife together with her husband Grant. They currently lead the Melkbos congregation. Lorna's also mother to 2 girls, I think about the same ages as your girls, Mike. Is that right? And she is also, by profession, she's a counseling psychologist. So we'll be getting Lorna's insights today as well. So we're going to kick it off, and the first topic we're going to tackle is on relationships and dating, and in particular, online dating. Now, ladies, I'll confess, I haven't done the online thing yet, and I'm not sure if that is something I will do, if that's for me. But I do have a funny story about being out there on a public platform. So for those of you who might know, I'm an advocate. I work in religious freedom law. And so as part of that, I do a lot of TV and radio interviews. And on this particular occasion, I had to do a TV on national television. But what I didn't know, that they was going to put my personal phone number on national TV. And so next moment, I didn't know that, okay, until I started getting messages and phone calls and WhatsApp messages, in particular from single and available men. And generally there was a thread going through these conversations. So they would phone me, and it would normally start off with some kind of legal question, of course, that they had to ask. And then quickly it would move on to prophesying, I see a Joyce Meyer ministry over you, and, just prophesying. And from there moving on to more kind of personal and friendly things. And sometimes even after the conversation had ended, they would send me WhatsApp messages, to keep the conversation going a little bit. So on this particular occasion, there was a gentleman who phoned me. This is how it went, the legal question. And a few hours later, I got a text message after the phone conversation was over. I got a text message from him. Now, at that stage, my profile pic was of me and a horse on WhatsApp. I love animals. I've got a dog, Brave, who's 3-year-old Labrador. I love animals. And so he obviously picked up on that on my WhatsApp message. And I'm going to speak now in his tone of voice, because remember, we had a telephone conversation, but this is how the WhatsApp came through. And I'll say it in Afrikaans and then I'll translate it into English. Ek sien jy hou van diere. Knipoog. Ek hou ook van diere. And he said, Ek broei met 'n skaars ras skouers. Ek stuur vir jou prentjies. So in English he says, I see you like animals. Wink, wink. I also like animals. Wink, wink. And then I breed a scarce breed of show chickens, sending you pictures. So can we have the first picture up? The other one. Give me the other one first. Okay. Sultans, oorsprong Turkije. Sultan chickens, origin Turkey. Next one. Poolse kuifkoppe. Kyk hierdie ene. Oorsprong Poland. So we have Polish crested chicken, origin not Poland, Poland. Okay. So the moral of the story, ladies, be very careful about putting your personal telephone number out on the public platforms. And then if a guy calls you chick, okay, it may be because he's actually breeding show chickens. So if that's your thing, hey, but anyways. Anybody's interested, I still have his number. Okay, so let's move on to online dating and relationships and things. And Lorna, I'm going to start with you. So you met Grant when you were a bit older only. And I'm going to ask you to just briefly share your testimony of faith with us. How did you, on the one hand, lay down marriage, while on the other hand, trusting God to get married? And how did he do it?
Well, is it on? Okay. So I was single for quite a long time. I'm from Canada. And when I was about 36, so that's single for a long time. I must say, during that journey up until then, it really was up and down, just in terms of saying, Lord, my life is in your hands. I've got to trust you into being quite discontent. And unfortunately, along the way as well, made a lot of mistakes. And even in that, wondering, God, can you forgive me for this? Or like you were saying, that sense of like, now is my punishment that I'll never marry somebody. And I'm just so thankful that God doesn't hold those things against me. But that was a lot of the journey that I needed to work through. When I was 36, then I was involved with a ministry called Living Waters in Canada. And we came to South Africa for a training. And I'd already been with this same ministry on a training to New Zealand. And I was tired, didn't want to come. It was going to be using up my holidays again. And then my husband, Grant, was a part of a ministry, his leadership of church came to the training. And we met over a few days. And then I went home and he started emailing me. And his very first email to me was, I'm not interested in friends. I have lots of friends. I'm actually emailing you to see if we could have a relationship.
So right off action, I like it.
And so it was actually a very, very interesting journey for us over a year. And one of the first hurdles too we had to get over was my response back was, well, I'm open, but do you know how old I am? And because I'm about 6 to 7 years older than my husband. And he said, yeah, I kind of knew that. But anyway, so we had a long distance relationship for about a year. And I must say that during that time, it was like God began to bring up a lot of my fears. This was probably the first time, because I've been said, oh, you're too picky, you're too fussy, you're looking for perfection. But with him, it's like I really could feel my heart was open. And as I started, the more I let him get close, it was like the fears began to come up. God, will you bring me right to the end where I've just opened my heart and I'm going to give myself, my heart, everything to him, and he's going to change his mind. And it was such an interesting wrestling for me, because I had such a sense of the Lord saying, Lorna, I am with you and I love you and you can trust me. And even if he does change his mind, I want you to stay open, because love always requires risk. And even if he does, I want you to know that I will carry you through this and I'll be faithful to you. And he didn't, and we did get married. But I think for me, that was really a theme all the way through of pushing him with the Lord. And Lord, can I trust you? Are you good to me? Am I valuable? Am I worthy of being loved? And so much of my journey through singleness was really, really learning to trust the Lord with everything, and not to step off that track, to take things into my own hands, because there are always consequences when we fall off of our own path, but really to say, Lord, if this is my path, I'll walk it out with you. And had my first child at 40, my second child at 42. So for a lot of you, I want to say there's lots of hope. So.
Lots of hope. That's an amazing testimony, Lorna, and I'm sure, particularly for all the girls, so encouraging. Amazing. So, Mike, we're going to put you in the hot seat now. Something that's becoming increasingly more popular is online dating. Obviously, girls finding, spouses, but some not having such good experiences on Tinder and all these platforms. For me recently, when I'm like, yeah, Lord, you need to speak to me for me if I need to do it. And I just felt the Lord say, my girl, Bumble's going to make you stumble. So, but maybe there's a different platform for me, who knows? But I want to ask you, from a biblical point of view, how should we be thinking about online dating?
Well, it may surprise you to know the Bible doesn't have anything to say about Tinder.
No.
Shockingly enough. And I think what we've got to do, we've got to approach the Bible not as a legal textbook looking for permission or loopholes to do certain things, but as something that represents God's heart for his people and what's best for us. And so we read the Bible and we say, what is the principles involved here? Because I want to apply God's principles to my life, because I want to live a life that's glorifying to God and obedient to him. And so one of the things I want to say is, regardless of what we answer in terms of what the Bible says, I think we can sometimes set parameters about what is clearly outside of God's will. But even what is within what is permissible, it may be permissible in general, it might not be permissible for you. Yeah? So we know the story of Hosea, whose wife was unfaithful. Now, according to the law, he was allowed to divorce her. But God told him, do not divorce her. So whilst it was legally permissible in general, it would have been a sin for him. And so one of the things we need to encourage people to do is to be faithful to what God has called you to as an individual. So that's the first thing I want to say, and I think that's essential. Other than that, we can't prescribe in black and white what Scripture says is grey. And so Scripture doesn't forbid online dating. I think it does give us some clear warnings, and I think online dating is dangerous. And one of the reasons it's dangerous is, and hopefully you have no idea how many wolves we deal with who come into churches, because there's wolves, there's men who know how vulnerable and naive Christian women are.
And they call themselves Christians, but
they call themselves Christians, that act like Christians. They know how to look like Christians. They are wolves in sheep's clothing, and their sheep's clothing is sometimes really good camouflage. And Christian women are naive. You are. And that's a good thing. You were called to have an innocence about us. But that can be used as a weapon against you. And even so-called Christian dating platforms. Men know. And so there's a danger there. But it's not forbidden. I think if it's something you feel you need to do, I think there's wise ways to do it and unwise ways to do it. And to be honest, I do understand the temptation of using those platforms, because most of you understand the concept of not being unequally yoked. You want to find a godly man. You look around your congregation and go, this is a very small pool and there's not many fish in it. Let's be realistic. And so you start going,
true story.
I want to find some, and I get frustrated with our guys, because you want guys who are going to be brave enough and courageous enough and leaders enough to actually risk their own reputation and their own ego and pride and actually step out there and approach you and speak to you. And again, one of the things about internet dating, it removes that. So men can look better than they are when they're actually too wussified to actually be a man to come up and approach a woman. They can just put the profile on.
A man like Grant.
Yeah, that's what you... And again, ladies, what are you looking for? Are you looking for a relationship with any man who seems godly, or are you looking for somebody who will take you further into the things of the kingdom? Secondly, dating. I think the word in itself, if by dating we mean I just want somebody to take me out for dinner occasionally, I think I don't think that's something that represents the heartbeat of Jesus very well. I think having friends and things like that. But for me, dating that is healthy is something where I'm looking for a relationship that will lead towards something significant. Just casual dating, I think, builds into us something where we're feeding our own ego. I think it breeds into us a willingness to break relationships too quickly. I think it leaves a trail of heartache. I think there's lots of problems with casual dating. Again, is it a sin to go out for dinner with a guy just because you want to do dinner? It's not a sin. I just think it can be unwise. And then the final thing I want to say about this is the concept of finding a mate or finding a partner that's your responsibility in this whole romantic notion is actually a very modern one. And it's become very individualistic. And I don't think that's a safe or healthy culture. Biblically, very often, marriages were arranged. And I'm not advocating for arranged marriages necessarily here, although if you pay me, maybe it can be organized.
The elders can give a hand. The elders can give a hand, Mike.
But I do think the concept of the community being involved in endorsing and helping in that process is very, very useful. And the protection, as an elder, I believe one of my roles is to protect the single ladies from predators. And so really for your own good, speak to some people and go, I'm in love, and love literally is blind. And you may think you can weed people out on social networks like that, but you can't, because we all know that how people present themselves on a dating site can be far removed from who they are. So involve the community, involve your leaders, involve your friends, involve people who know you well in the process of that. And I do want to say one final thing. This concept that is the one, I don't even see that biblically either. I mean, what would happen if God had one person for you and that one person was disobedient to God? Then you messed up, right? I do believe that God can create something beautiful from two people who love Jesus and who are very godly. So, yeah.
Mike, so I don't think you've seen that video. We're having it up again.
Oh,
where the guy-
yes.
Yeah.
I
So,
just feel sorry for the guy that nobody stood behind.
So we're not going to be doing that, but here's the big question on everyone's lips. Will you be having a single men's conference where you're going to
I
help
think,
on a bit?
I actually think we need to have a single guys conference. I think we do. But I want to say this, girls, have a little bit of sympathy for Josh Gen guys. Seriously, when I was growing up and we would be into dating, asking a girl on a date is scary. Asking a girl in Josh Gen is 100 times more scary, because there's an assumption that if I ask you for coffee, you're going to ask me to marry you. And it really is. I mean, for a man to put his heart out there and risk that, especially if he's done it once or twice and been turned down, it's a really, really scary thing. But I think the world as well has emasculated men. And men don't know how to be men properly now because they're told that's toxic. And so I have some sympathy, but that's our responsibility to help disciple our young men into being the kind of partners that you can see, this person can lead me into the things of God. And I think we can help some of those guys in that. So bear with us.
So good, so good. Awesome. So Zandi, I'm going to ask you, as the one of the mothers in City Bowl congregation, I know in City Bowl in particular, there are lots of girls who are doing the online dating thing. And as I said earlier, some have good stories to tell. I've even found spouses online, and others have not so good stories to tell. So as someone who's walked with some of these girls, can you maybe give us, we heard Mike say now that it's not necessarily a sin thing, and while for the one person, maybe for another person not. Can you give us some wisdom, some boundaries, if someone feels that that is something that they want to do and that they feel in the Lord, that they have the faith to do, the Lord's okay with it? How should we go about doing it?
Okay, so Nadine, I'm going to start off by highlighting some pitfalls of online dating. So Online dating, it's a service that provides you access to a wider pool in terms of potential romantic partners. Note that I didn't say potential husband, I said potential romantic partners. And it alludes to what Mike was talking about in terms of commitment and serial dating. So those are the trends. But also I think what appeals to people in terms of online dating is that you're able to interact with somebody before you meet them face to face. And also some websites, they do matching based on your profile. So what you find is when you interact with somebody based on their profile, it's a set of facts. So what we've seen is people can tend to commodify people and objectify people. Because there isn't that social interaction of being able to interact with a person and try and discern who the person is.
And sometimes when you meet him, he doesn't even look the way he looks on his profile pic.
Yes,
I mean,
exactly. So obviously there's also the issue of people are not sincere. So that's one of the things. But also I think even with you might think you have a larger pool of potential candidates, but what we've seen even with the success stories in City Bowl, the type of men that usually go for online dating, it's if they're Christian men on Christian dating apps, they have unhealthy expectations of what they want in a wife. Or they're divorced or widowed and they don't have people their age, or they're shy and social awkward and, don't want to man up, so to say. So if you're going to go onto online dating, those are the things that you have to be aware of. And so the pool isn't that big actually, because if from a biblical point of view, you want somebody who's going to be a spiritual leader in your home and you have to submit to this person. You want somebody who's passionate about Jesus and somebody that you're going to come alongside and advance the kingdom. So it's going to be very tricky. The pool isn't that wide actually, if you think about it.
and what you're saying, like Kim said last night, you might actually, thinking you're going to meet a knight in shining armor, you meet the
Yes.
knight in shining drama. I love that. Yeah, so be careful online.
Yeah, so be careful of those things. So what also we've seen with some ladies is they get into that pattern of going online and then it becomes a casual thing. We've had 2 ladies in City Bowl that have fallen away from the Lord because they found unsaved unbelievers on the dating sites. So it's serious. It's a
Price of their
weighty,
soul.
it's a great thing, but it's a weighty thing that you really, as a single person, you have to wrestle with God and wrestle, and also like James 3:13 talks about meekness in wisdom. You need that humility and to be able to discern with your leaders, is this something that really I can pursue? And just some practical aspects, once you've wrestled with those things in terms of, is it sin for me or is it not sin? And you've chatted to your leaders and they feel like, okay, you can go for it. I think, okay, I'm just trying to find my notes. Practical things, I would say avoid hookup dating apps altogether. And if it's not your intention to get married, then what are you doing on a dating website? Somebody uses the analogy of going to shopping without money. You're going to leave frustrated or you're going to take something that does not belong to you. So if you don't want to get married, don't even go that route. And then in terms of creating your profile, like I think we've got like 2 ladies that found that God blessed with spouses from online dating, but they were very intentional in terms of stating their beliefs and what they're looking for, almost like overstating it in a way and almost like trying to weed out and freak out people online. Like, I'm a Christian woman, I'm in love with Jesus, looking for, like you're
Bit of a
gonna
Jesus
have,
freak,
you're gonna
almost.
have to overstate those things. And then when there are people that you're considering in terms of profiles, be open about that with your leaders. And discuss those things so that you don't get sucked into the cycle of objectifying. And then when you're like, okay, I'm interested in this person and I'm gonna meet them, also be accountable with that. It's just wisdom, because these are strangers. These are strangers, so there are dangers. So you need to be very accountable and open. And then it's gonna take a lot of, that's why it's a faith thing and having grace for it, because you have to proactively get to know this person, like go to his church and see how he interacts with his leaders, how he worships, interact. So it's going to be a lot of work. So you must really have faith for that.
And even emotionally, because
Yes.
there's a lot of rejection involved in the process. So no, you're not just signing up for the nice coffee dates and whatever, but there's the potential of rejection involved.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
that's why the faith is very important,
Yeah,
and the accountability.
and also guarding your heart, which is my next point, because you're opening up yourself to all sorts of your heart can be wounded through the process. Also, I just want to say, it can, even all of that hard work and what Kim was talking about, knight in shining drama, even if it is a success and you end up getting married, there is a lot of brokenness usually that people have to work through. So do you have faith and grace for a knight in shining drama? Because like I said, the type of men that tend to be on those sites, it's that kind of, yeah.
Very good, Zandi. That was very helpful. I think these are just, ladies, we're not saying, no, you may not do it. As Mike said, the Bible doesn't say, no, it's forbidden. But these are certainly weighty things to think about before you go on that
Yeah.
journey.
Can I just share? In the Song of Solomon, three times, the writer says, and it's a warning to young and married women. He says, do not stir up or awaken love until it pleases. There's different ways of saying it, but and essentially what he's saying is, one, don't push for love too young. Yeah. And I think sometimes young singles, it's like, I'm 21, I'm going to be too old. It's like, you don't realize you've got a long time ahead of you. Second, it's a warning against becoming so desperate that you'll look for love in the wrong places. And the internet marketplace can be, I'm not saying it is, it can be the wrong place to look. And then third, it's a warning against manufacturing feelings of love when they don't exist. And that is a very real temptation when you find somebody who ticks all the right boxes. Okay, he's a Christian, he's a leader, he's not bad looking, he's not got beat all, and I'm desperate, so I'll give my heart. And it's a very real danger as well, is that you'll just settle for, somebody once said the ladies in Josh Gen are too fussy. The standards are too high. I said, no, some of them are just looking for anything that loves Jesus with a pulse. and I was being facetious, but there is a sense where you can just become so desperate, I'll take anything.
So Mike, would the solution be to create a Josh meets his Jen, our own internet dating website, with the blessing of the elders, just putting it out there?
I think for me, the solution is just hang around in groups and see how people are in friendship and in social settings, in church, with the leaders, and trust God and trust your friends and trust your leaders and say, let's see what God has in store. But there's another scripture I think is very, very important on this, because I can understand how the need for family, the need for a partner, the need for children, especially in ladies. I've never been a lady.
Thank goodness.
Yes. I was a man trapped in a woman's body for 9 months.
I gave him
Sorry,
permission to do
but-
that one.
But I can understand the absolute, it can feel like if I don't get this, I'm going to die. There's an absolute desperation. But in Corinthians, in 1 Corinthians 10, verse 31, it says, so whether you eat or drink, I mean, this is like, think, if I don't have this, I'm going to die. But whether you eat or drink, or whatever you do to the glory of God. And whether it's finding a husband, having children, career, whatever it is, no matter how desperate you're feeling, how much of a desire there is, I think the priority is, Lord, let me do this to your glory.
I want to touch on something that you touched on, the desire for children. And Delia, I'm going to start with you now. As an older single, I'm sure you would have had to process the thought of, maybe you've dealt with the thing of, okay, I'm getting older, maybe I'm not going to have a husband. But for a lot of ladies, it's very real, this thing of, but my body was made to have children. And to process that thing of, well, maybe I'm not going to have children, maybe I'm never going to be a mother. And I want to ask you, from an emotional, spiritual point of view, how has it impacted you? And how have you processed, or are you processing this thing of potentially not being able to be a mother?
Yeah, so first of all, I just wanted to say kids is something that it's been a desire of my heart. Jen often teases me if we go to a place where there are kids, sometimes I'll gravitate towards the kids before the adults. But I feel like some of the things that God's shown me is that I can't process these things unless I take hold of certain fundamental truths about God. And number one, God is my Father, and He loves me, and He wants to give me good gifts. But sometimes not giving me the thing that I'm asking for is the good gift that He's giving me. And a little while ago, I was reading, I think it's in Matthew 20:20, where James and John's mum comes to Jesus and says, can my sons, one sit on the right and one sit on the left? And Jesus turns to her and says, you don't know what you're asking. And I felt like in that moment, God said to me, we sometimes don't realize what it is we're asking God for. And sometimes I have sort of the tunnel vision of my life, but God kind of zooms back the camera and He sees the big picture of my life in eternity. And I feel like He sometimes says to me, Delia, you don't know what you're asking. And then the other thing that I've sort of had to process is, I've thought, God, this is the way you made me. You made me a woman. You made me able to bear children. Surely it must be in your will for my life. And I remember God just dropping in my heart one day, and saying to me, Delia, and kind of doing a little audit of my life and saying, like, is there any unrepentant, repetitive, consistent sin in your life today? And I remember saying, no, Lord. And then I felt like He said to me, but Delia, you are in my perfect, my good, my pleasing will for you. You're right where I want you to be. And that's the safest place that you can be. Not necessarily the happiest or the most comfortable. The Bible is full of stories of people that were doing what God asked them to do, and they were certainly not happy, and they were not comfortable. But He does promise that will be the safest place. And I think it's also, and it's been touched on already today, just finding that place of contentment. And I love how the Bible hints at things and some of the words that it uses. So when Paul speaks about contentment, he talks about the secret of contentment. And a secret is hard to find. And when I read that, I was like, sure, God, I see it, But then He gives us the answer a little bit later. He says, the secret of being content in any and every, whatever situation you're in, I can do all things through Christ. So it's putting Jesus in the center. And when Jesus is in the center, I can do singleness through Christ, who gives me strength. I can do not having kids of my own through Christ, who gives me strength.
And Delia, you're such an example, as you said, just of, and Jane, and so many of us, for me, the Kingsley kids and the Van Westhuizen kids and, Jock and Jeanette, and, I don't have children of my own, but as I've made my way into families' lives, like Janet said, I have so many, kids' innocence, and even that need is met. And you're such an example of it as well. So, God, so good in all these things. But Lorna, I want to turn to you and ask from a psychological perspective, what would you advise in terms of processing these very real and possibly painful thoughts and emotions around the thing of possibly not having children?
I appreciate, Delia, just your response, because I think that's a healthy response. And I know it's ongoing and it comes and goes at various times. But I think for a lot of people, it's almost like we get stuck there. There's such a longing, there's such a desire, and it's absolutely understandable. But that loss or grief or disappointment that doesn't get processed actually can really affect us. And I think we get stuck. And in that place, and ultimately become bitter and really lose our way in the Lord. And I think there are times where the truth is we don't have any control over our lives in the sense of what we think we want, what we think we need, and really what God's plan is for our lives. And I think for all of us, if we get stuck in those places where there really is such a deep loss and a deep grief, we do need to process it. And so if we can process it on our own, that's great, but often we can't. And it's often the people around us who realize that this thing has too much hold. And yes, it's understandable, but God so wants to come into those disappointments and the loss and the grief and really break in. And I do think too that it's a place of idolatry, where we have to say, God, everything in me has wanted this, but this has become bigger than you. And as Delia was saying, we can't see the full picture. We don't know what God's plan is for our lives. And it's almost like letting go of that greatest treasure. And it's like, no, but I have a right to it. I have to have it. And I think for all of us, we've got struggles in various areas of our lives, but when wanting a child, and also you're living with the hope, the fear you might, and then you cross that line where the hope is gone, and which is a great thing that we have to wrestle with. But again, it's holding that open and allowing the Lord to take it, and then facing the reality and working through the grief, and in that really finding that place where God, my life is in your hands. I have to trust that your ways are good and your ways are perfect. And so I think it's really important. And again, that can be a journey through, there can be levels and levels of grieving that we have to work through. But ultimately, the purpose is really to come into a place of being so surrendered in the Lord, and we know that He's good, and that we know that we can trust Him. And then our lives, even our grieving, glorifies Him and says that He is good. So I would encourage anyone caught in that to work through that grief. Otherwise, we get stuck.
Mike, that then brings us to considering what the options are for single ladies who are possibly never getting married and never having children coming from that marriage. A lot of them are saying, but I was made for children, I want children. And even in the Lord, I might feel I need to have children. So there are a few options, and obviously with modern technology, there are more options available. And actually, even some of the marrieds might find this conversation swapping to Afrikaans now, very interesting. But let's talk around, I'm going to mention a few options, but let's kick off with adoption. How should we think as single ladies around adoption?
I think we need to handle these things sensitively. And as a man, that's not my strong point. But I think it is very real. And I think the first thing we've got to ask with these questions is, who am I doing this for? I was in sales for a long time. One of the things I learned in sales is people making emotional decisions and then justify those decisions with facts rather than... And I think in the church we can often do that. So my desire, maybe even an idolatrous desire to have kids, but then I can find loads of scriptures and loads of justifications, the spirit of adoption and, loving.
God puts the
and
lonely
God
into...
adds the lonely into family. So we can find all these justifications to do what is a selfish thing. And parenting or becoming a parent can be the most selfless act or the most selfish act. So I would say we need to first consider that. I have the utmost respect and admiration for single moms. I think Chantal and I, we've raised 2 amazing kids, and they've been relatively easy kids. And I don't know how we've survived. And that's been 2 of us. How you survive as a single parent, I don't know. And single parents, men and women, I salute you. You deserve medals. But there is a reality of the financial, emotional, spiritual burden that raising a child has. And if you're going to decide to do that as a single parent, understand the difficulties that's going to be. And yes, we're part of a family and we're part of a church. And you can say, I would be a single mom, but I've got a family around me. Well, yeah, but you've got to consider that when you go home, it's going to be you. I don't think there's any sin in a single person adopting a child. I would say this, the statistics show that fatherlessness is the #1 predictor for drug use, imprisonment, teenage pregnancy, a whole host of social ills. More than race, more than socioeconomic status, fatherlessness is the #1 predictor of negative outcomes in somebody's life. And so I don't think single parenthood is ideal, but having one parent is better than having no parents. Yeah? So again, I don't think it would be a sin for a single person to adopt a child, unless adopting that child is going to cause you not to be able to walk in obedience to what God called you to do. So even for me, my wife wanted a 3rd child. I said, no, we can't have a 3rd child. It will be an obstacle to us walking in God's calling. Now, some people have 5 kids. That's not a sin. It would have been a sin for me. And so when it comes to adoption, I think Jesus even said, if you're going to build a house, count the cost before you start. Don't get lost in I've always said God is a great salesman. How does he cause women to want babies? I mean, like the pain of childbirth and, the financial cost. He just makes them look and smell nice. So you see this baby and something in you I want that thing. But it's got to go beyond that initial emotional thing. And it's got to be a really considered, prayerful, godly decision that you shouldn't take alone. It's a decision you should process very carefully with those people that God has put you among to walk with you and help you.
Again, the principles are actually the same as with the dating conversation.
I think very much so.
The heart is deceitful above all things, therefore, wisdom
Yeah.
in the counsel of your elders. And to really, what is in my heart? What's the reason? Is this thing for me, or is it actually to glorify God and then to do things in accountability?
Yeah.
So, Mike, I want to move on to something a little bit more potentially tricky. Can we talk around surrogacy? And I think that would also include this concept of snowflake adoption, which for some ladies may be very new. What are we even talking about? So if you can even just explain, just firstly what we mean by that, and then is that okay or is it not okay from a biblical point of view?
Now we're getting into a real minefield. And again, the Bible doesn't reference some of these things. There is some references because medical technology is advanced. And as the one guy says in the movie Jurassic Park, scientists have been so busy asking what they can do, they didn't stop to ask whether they should do. And so we're seeing these things. So there's 2 forms of surrogacy. One is called gestational surrogacy, and then the other is traditional surrogacy. So traditional surrogacy is where a lady basically offers to be impregnated and give birth to a child on behalf of another couple where there are fertility issues. And so through one natural or artificial means, the sperm of another man is placed with the egg of the woman, and she gives birth and then gives that child to somebody else. There are many issues around that ethical and moral and spiritual issues around that, and surrogacy in general. For me, I think when the Bible speaks of two becoming one, that act of the seed of man and the woman's egg coming together, I think that's crossing a line. I think basically allowing yourself to be made pregnant by somebody else with an intention of keeping that child or giving that child away is problematic biblically, and I think that does cross a line. There may be some people who disagree with that, but I think Andrew, myself, I think most of the elders would agree that would be crossing a line into sin. I think that's the domain of the two becoming one. That's something reserved within the confines of the sanctity of marriage. But then there's also the gestational surrogacy, which is where snowflake adoption comes in, where there is an embryo that is implanted into the womb. So snowflake, most of you will know, but when couples undergo IVF treatment, the failure rate is so high, what they will often do is they will fertilize a number of eggs at the same time. And because we believe that life begins at conception, basically you've got a bunch of lives there that are implanted a few at a time, and the rest are frozen for future use. And so some Christian organizations say, well, why don't you adopt these frozen embryos so that they're not destroyed or murdered, to avoid euphemisms at some stage. And so some women will have those embryos implanted into their womb. There's not been the act of the man seed. It's genetically completely somebody else's. And again,
So Mike, just to clarify what it is it's adoption basically of a pre-born child.
yes,
And then it's often people who it's not their egg and sperm, but it's somebody else's.
Somebody
that
else's,
embryo
yeah.
that then gets implanted into them, so that they have the experience of being.
so you're
pregnant
basically, so the argument is I am giving this embryo a chance at life, where otherwise it would just be destroyed or used for medical research purposes, which is horrific if you think about it, because we do believe it's human life. Now, there are a number of things and considerations in this. Not least is the fact that I did some research of snowflake adoptions where that embryo is implanted. The success rate is about 40%, which means you're setting yourself up for heartache. There's good chances you're going to miscarry. And as somebody whose wife has miscarried, it is an emotional obstacle. It's the death of a child. And so you've got to prepare yourself for that. Other than that, I think, again, it's a gray area, but I would ask questions like this. As a single Christian woman who then appears pregnant, how does that affect your witness to the world? The Bible says, for example, flee the very appearance of evil. You can say, well, I'll explain what it is. Well, you may be able to, but many people you won't interact with. And so will it affect, I'm not saying it will affect your testimony, therefore it's a sin. I'm saying that is a question you would have to ask. Will this affect my testimony? As somebody who claims to be a follower of Jesus and sexually pure, and that sex is only with, and then suddenly I arrive pregnant. I think there's issues around some of the questions people ask in terms of morality on issues of surrogacy are issues around, does this in any way exploit women? Does it constitute the selling of children? Is it a violation of the marriage covenant? Because, pregnancy and giving birth is something that God designed ideally within a married couple. And the fact that reproductive technology, so even for a married couple, and this is another subject, to even choose IVF, I think is something that you have to do and consider all these implications that that treatment will 99.9% of the time necessitate the death of some of those embryos. And so those are some of the ethical and Christian and moral
Yeah, Mike, thank you
things.
so much for bringing clarity to some of these things, because I think, the Bible isn't always clear on these things, and yet there are some principles that
Yeah.
definitely, so that's very helpful. Ladies, I'm aware of that it's 1:00, and we did say the conference was going to end at 1, but I'm sure you are finding this conversation as interesting as I am, and we're coming in for a landing. I'm moving on to just the last set of questions. It's going to be a lot shorter. So for those of you who absolutely need to go, we understand that. But for the rest of you, I want to encourage you, I think it's going to be about another 15 minutes or so, and then we're going to land the conference. So the last theme that I want us to touch on is this thing of, and it's come through repeatedly, is single but not lonely. And Delia, I want to ask you again, as a single lady, what would you say to the elders or the elders' wives who are watching this? How would you, as a single, like to be supported?
So when I was thinking about that question, Nadine sent us a little illustration of how we would be seated on the stage. I thought, when I looked at it, I was like, that for me is a practically prophetic picture. I'm safely sandwiched in between my elder and my elder's wives. And I just thought that for me is just such a lovely picture. Or this is a beautiful picture of, I think, as a single person, what I would love and what I love. Sandwich me in between. And then I think just practically, what does that look like? And Jen made reference to it when she was chatting. Make me part of the chaos of your lives. I think sometimes, and not just a dinner invite once a month, that's a formally planned thing, but like my experience with the elders in my congregation, it's such an amazing, sometimes arrive in the middle of the chaos. The little ones are screaming, and the husband is busy trying to juggle all the things he's doing. The wife's trying to juggle homeschooling and dinner and the chaos, and then it's bath time. And I'll say, okay, well, I'll go and bath the kids, and I'm busy down the passage bathing the kids. And then when we finish, there's a plate of food waiting for me on the table, and it's just part of the chaos of their lives. And then something Jen also made reference to, there are days when I kind of think, oh man, I am so tired of just being the minister of finance and the minister of home affairs and the minister of transport and everything in my life. I think for me it would be lovely. And I think sometimes single girls, maybe it's a pride thing that we need to deal with, but sometimes we don't necessarily ask always for help. And I just thought it would be lovely if sometimes the elders and if you've got a particular sort of expertise in an area, like if you're good at helping people buy cars, or you're good at maintenance or whatever, just if you see a single girl, maybe just in conversation, hey, how's things at home? Do you need a washer changed in your tap, or is there a bulb that needs to be changed, or like, how's your car going? Are you worried about anything? Because sometimes, like, I'll sometimes hear something in my car and think, oh man, I can't deal with that today. And then I'll just kind of ignore it. And then a month later, it was just a little problem, but now it's a big problem. So just from a practical perspective, maybe don't wait for us to ask first, maybe just in conversation. Ask some of those
And
things.
then just as a single myself, there are days that are harder than others. Christmas for me is not often the easiest time, because it almost amplifies that thing of family and kids, and draw the singles in when you get your families together over Christmas. Valentine's Day is another hard one. Maybe drop, single a WhatsApp, or, I love you, you're the apple of God's eye, whatever. Have them, invite them, over to your house, maybe even on Valentine's Day, bring them in. Mother's Day is another one, and we may not have children of our own, but many of us are, let's say, walking with other ladies who, in a sense, are our spiritual children. And just so those are some of the days that are hard for us, and it would be nice to be remembered on those days.
Can I also just say, as you were talking, I've got a friend who I sort of was around when her girls grew up, and just pretty much every year on Mother's Day, she sends me a message. They don't live in South Africa anymore. And she sends me a message and wishes me happy Mother's Day just for the input that I've had in her girls' lives. And it's just, for me, it's so unexpected, but so special.
And then just to say, at the same time, on Mother's Day, I will send to my spiritual mums, Kim and there are others. I'll send a message and say, just thank you for the mum for the mother that you are in the faith to me. And you know, it is that thing of what we sow, we reap. So it definitely, it goes both ways. Zandi, as an elder's wife, what would you say to us single ladies? How can they make it easier for you as elders' wives and as elder couples to lead them and support them?
Okay, the way I'm going to approach that question, Ned, is that how does the breakdown happen in terms of church family? I think it's two things: perceptions and expectations. Perceptions that we have about married people or couples, and then from the married's point of view, perceptions that we have about single people. And I think the key is, both with expectations and perceptions, is communication, like Jenny was saying. I think we need to be honest and communicate a lot. Like, I don't mind if you message me or you call me and you say, I need this. And then we see how we can meet that need. And in terms of expectations, it's not always going to be clinical and clean, like Jenny was saying. It's going to be chaos, being in each other's lives, and we have to be open to that. But I think another hindrance is in terms of perception, is shame, especially when it comes to being vulnerable, when it comes to single people being vulnerable. There can be that thing of shame that I'm going to be seen this way. But I just want to encourage you that, like, we were also single and we know the struggles. So there's no shame. And in family, there's no shame, there's mercy,
We see each other's, we get an appreciation for each other's challenges.
Yes, exactly. So it's, for me, it's those
That's
things.
amazing. Communicate your needs. It's very good. Lorna, our singles group also includes a number of single mums, and quite a number of them have joined us for this conference, which is amazing. Really want to honor you ladies. As single parents, they have some unique emotional and practical needs and challenges. So I want to ask you two questions briefly. Number one, what would you say to the single mum who struggles to juggle work, home, parenting, church, and personal life? I mean, it's difficult enough doing some of these things as a single, but now to have on top of that the responsibility of raising a child. And then secondly, how can we as church family draw alongside our single mums in particular to support them?
Well, in line with what Mike had to say, I take my hat off to single moms. Just the times when my husband's away, it can really be overwhelming. And I think it is very stressful. And so the first thing that I'd say is it's so important to reach out. And so really to invite people to share in a part of your life, and also to ask or to invite yourself to be a part of other families. And in that particularly is just for me the reality of the need for the masculine voice. And so I think with single moms, just even the statistics that Mike was mentioning about a fatherless children growing up without their fathers around. And there's just something about the presence of the masculine that it's like it brings order and it settles so much that a mom can't do or can't always do. And I know even for myself, just getting overwhelmed, and Grant will come along and just settle. And so really how important it is to in church family, to find family where there's room for the masculine voice. So if it's finding a couple or families where the man can step in at certain times, or your children can be included in particular activities. I even spoke to a couple of single moms, and they agreed that just having a man in the church come alongside their kids and teach some of the boys activities that they're not able to do, or even that masculine voice of affirmation into the lives of their girls is so, so significant. But it's really important for you to step out and ask for the help, because often the squeaky wheel does get the oil. And so to push past some of the shame or the disqualification and actually ask for help. I think the other thing that's key is the whole area of guilt. That often as single mom, there's so much pressure. You're trying to do everything and you feel like you never do anything well because it's ongoing. And so there can be an overcompensation often towards the children because of that. And I think even to get perspective, some of the people that know you and walk with you around where that there may be that overcompensation, but also the guilt for asking for help, that you feel like you're inconveniencing a family or inconveniencing someone. And in a body of believers, we are to be family for one another. So really to encourage you to be willing to let your needs known and really find a community of people who believe in you and walk with you and who love your kids and who can step in and really support you in that way. Then for the church community, obviously it's the other side that I think we must be much more intentional and aware of the single moms around. So in the same way as the single women who also need the masculine voice, I believe, it is also that as a church, just to take note of the moms who are struggling and be willing to step in. And it may be things like babysitting, like having the family over for special activities. It might be things like driving their kids to school events. I think about how much a mom is a taxi. So if she's also working, also having to do everything. And so there are different practical ways that we as a church can step in and really help to lighten the load. I also agree, like with helping with cars and a lot of the things around the home that maybe normally a husband would do, and just to be very sensitive in that area so that they feel really, really supported and carried.
Wonderful. Mike, finally, as an elder, what would you say to the single ladies, including the whole range of single ladies here, and also to the elders, because some of them have been watching this and will be watching it later, as the fathers in our congregations who will ultimately give an account for everyone, including the single ladies entrusted to the care. How can they encourage and support our singles and make them part of family?
First, I want to say this. We are so blessed to have so many amazing ladies in our congregation, and you have a valuable and essential role to play in who we are. I was meeting with some people yesterday afternoon, potential deacons, and they were just raving about the influence that Jenny and Delia have had on them. And it's just like two single ladies who've changed who we are as a church. And you don't need a partner, you don't need to be married to have huge significance in who we are and what God is doing. And in fact, in some ways, you're blessed because you maybe have more time than some of the married. But I want to say this as well, and it touches on some of the things that were said. I think we've almost got into this thing that as single ladies, if you've got issues or you need counseling or you've got problems, you'll go to an elder's wife. And I want to say the elders are also available to you. I'm reluctant to say this, but I really believe that one of the roles of an elder is to be a father to the fatherless and a husband to the widows and to the singles, in a godly way, obviously, not in a creepy way, and to help father your children, and take them out for burgers. And we live in a world that's made us so kind of almost, it's creepy for a grown man to be having a burger with a child who isn't his own. And it's like, we've got to get over that. I think there's boundaries we can put in place that are healthy and safe and all of that. But to have a greater sense that we're not a society, we're not a club, we're not an organization, we're a family. And in a family, we give of ourselves to each other. And I think it's a two-way street. I have been massively blessed by so many singles who've come and helped us with our kids, babysat, come and cooked for us, helped when we're sick, all of those things. And we're in a position to be a blessing to singles where we've got things that they don't. And I think rather than, and I think a lot of these discussions can be focused on what I don't have. If we all focus on what we do have, and that what we've been given is a blessing from God for the benefit of others, then we'll all be so much more rich. Even on an apostolic viewpoint, Paul writes to one church, he says, how I long to come and visit you to add to what is lacking. And I think every one of us, God has added you here because you have something that we're lacking. And we have something that you're lacking. And that recognition is going to bring us closer and make us healthier and see the whole church move forward in Christ and be an example to the world. And this is what I would love. I would love the world to be provoked to jealousy when they see how we live together. And they say, how is it that you're like that? We say, because of our God. Come and meet the God that we know, and you can have the life that we have. And that's what I would say.
Beautiful. Alda, can I ask you okay, we're going to try a third time, lucky now. Apparently the other congregation thought about that picture of the bridge, because in a sense we ending where we started. And Patty, I'm going to invite you you can take that microphone, just what you felt. But what Mike said now, I can personally testify of. You know, my life is so integrated with so many families and elders who've truly been fathers to me, you know, even though some of them have been younger than what I am. They've helped me with major life decisions. But not only that, and yes, I've babysat and I've done those things, but they've become friends. And I'm co-workers with them in the kingdom. And there's just this mutual thing of they benefit and I benefit, and that's how the family of God's supposed to work. And just that picture again of the bridge that we started with in the beginning. And I think this is so part of what God's been doing this weekend, as we've heard, you know, about the lives of marrieds and some of the things, the benefits, the beauty, but also some of the challenges of married life, and the other way around, you know, some of the beauties of single life and some of the struggles of singles. And in that sense, God has brought us closer together. He's really built that bridge, removed some of the planks that haven't been helpful, put some other planks in, so that together we can run into the good plans and purposes of God and into our inheritance together. And Patty just also had something. Patty, can you just come up on the stage so they can see you? She just briefly wanted to share something around that as well.
I just wanted to share this weekend. In my mind, it was something that we were doing for the single ladies. And I cannot explain to you how God has touched my heart. Last night and today, I just sense so strongly the Holy Spirit. And there's things in my life that He's made adjustments in during this time. So I'm speaking from a married woman's point of view, that we have so much in common, that there's a thread that came through last night and today. And that thread is that for all of us, single or married, our identity is in Jesus. Where you may struggle as singles, that your identity is in being single, sometimes we struggle with the fact that our identity comes sometimes from our husband and his approval and what he feels and thinks about us. But at the end of the day, we all have very similar struggles. And that in that picture of the bridge over there is that we are tied together because we have similar struggles, that we have similar things that that we need to deal with. And I feel like the Holy Spirit this weekend has just pinpointed things of discontentment, of disappointment, of being in the wrong season and needing to move into the new season. There's so many things that He's pinpointed for you, but He's also pinpointed for us as married. And that I just feel that there's a knitting of hearts this weekend. And I feel so privileged that I was able to be a part of the singles conference, and that we would walk out together hand in hand. Because what is the bottom line? Our identity is in Jesus and Jesus alone.